One of the things I say in response to the media is when they talk about, or especially early on, about the way I did my job, I said, I will absolutely leave the court when I do my job as poorly as you do yours.
Yes, welcome back. I don't know if you have seen this recently. AIC float subpoena against Supreme Court Justice Robert. Going down on this article, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez suggested Congress should consider using subpoena power to force Supreme Court Justice John Roberts to testify before lawmakers about ethics issues.
Courts, if they were to proceed without any check on their power, without any balance on their power, then we will start to see an undemocratic and frankly dangerous authoritarian expansion of power in the Supreme Court, which is what we are seeing now, from the overturning of abortion rights to the ruling that discrimination and frankly stripping the full personhood and dignity of LGBTQ people in the United States. These are the types of rulings that signal a dangerous creep towards authoritarianism and centralization of power in the court. In fact, we have members of the court themselves, with Justice Elena Kagan, saying that the court is beginning to assume the power of a legislature. And right now, whether it is expansion of the court.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to, how do you do that? Are you proposing a law or a bill?
There's several ways. First, we have a Senate Judiciary Committee that is beginning the process of investigating the entanglements and conflicts of interest. Just 1 to 2 weeks before the student loan ruling, the country learned that Justice Samuel Alito was accepting gifts from billionaires who were lobbying against Supreme Court that were lobbying before the Supreme Court against student loan forgiveness. Just weeks before, we learned that he was accepting gifts from them and travel and vacations from them before he decided to vote and rule in their favor. And so I believe that if Chief Justice Roberts will not come before Congress for an investigation voluntarily, I believe that we should be considering subpoenas. We should be considering investigations. We must pass much more binding and stringent ethics guidelines where we see members of the Supreme Court potentially breaking the law, as we saw in the refusal, with Clarence Thomas to recuse himself from cases implicating his wife in January 6th. There also must be impeachment on the table. We have a broad level of tools to deal with misconduct, overreach, and abuse of power.
Yes, if you don't know, the Supreme Court has been doing a lot recently, and Democrats seems not to be happy with this. According to this article from NPR, there is no trust now. Student loan borrowers respond to Supreme Court decision. Friday, Supreme Court decision striking down President Biden's student loan cancellation plan has left a lot of borrowers wondering, where do we go from here? I would say Congress need to pass this, but that is not going to happen, says Strickland, a 25-year-old borrower in New York City. It's become a cultural war around this issue, and like this is my income, this affects the money I'm about to spend on grocery. Strickland attended the University of North Carolina. He had to take out roughly $30,000 in federal loans, which is on par with the national average for a bachelor degree from a public institution. He graduated in 2020 at the height of the pandemic and has yet to consider loan payment or interest yet. Both have been on pause since he was a student. Now, with Biden's student loan relief plan officially dead and payment set to resume in full in the fall, Strickland has resigned himself to his new debt-laden reality. So you can see exactly what is going on. A lot of people are not happy after the Supreme Court strike this down. And now AIC is coming forward talking about impeachment. I understand something with Democrat. When they see something that is actually in their favor, you'll be hearing impeachment nearly on daily basis. But when it pertains to other issues, they are silent. AIC going insane on this rant on CNN, it is something I expected because when this happened, she went viral.
And so I believe that if Chief Justice Roberts will not come before Congress for an investigation voluntarily, I believe that we should be considering subpoenas. We should be considering investigations. We must pass much more binding and stringent ethics guidelines where we see members of the Supreme Court potentially breaking the law, as we saw in the refusal, with Clarence Thomas to recuse himself from cases implicating his wife in January 6th. There also must be impeachment on the table. We have a broad level of tools to deal with misconduct, overreach, and abuse of power. And the Supreme Court has not been receiving the adequate oversight necessary in order to preserve their own legitimacy. And in the process, they themselves have been destroying the legitimacy of the court, which is profoundly dangerous for our entire democracy.
Congresswoman.
Yes, this is AIC now bringing back the issue of January 6th, talking about impeachment of this man. What are your thoughts pertaining to this? He has done what they don't like, and they are now looking into all possible ways, to bring him down. Like what has been happening with Trump recently. It is just a similar situation. I saw this and I thought it nice to react to this video so you can see clearly the kind of hypocrisy with Democrat. If this was in favor of Democrat, AIC would not advocate that they should pass a bill, bring down this man.
The Supreme Court ending affirmative action today really means, and specifically what you should be doing if you're applying to college as a minority. First, the breaking news is that affirmative action, even if meant to promote racial diversity, now officially, legally equals racial discrimination. How? Because the court says college admissions is a zero-sum game. There are only so many spots, so if you give extra points to one minority, then another minority group loses, which is argued happened to Asians at Harvard. If there's one quote you remember, it should be this: students must be treated based on his or her experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race. But look, if you're applying to college, you should not abandon talking about your race. If it's important to your story, you should be writing about it, talking about it in your interview. The same colleges will still value diversity, but the burden has now shifted from the admissions officers being able to ask you about it to you, the applicant, writing about it.
The Pride people are mad at him because